You may think I'm a little nutty coming out here and running trains on a day like this. But after all of us who have a hobby, whether it's playing golf or simply going country walking, are a bit obsessed about it. Now, I must admit, I like the big trains, the Gauge 1. So let's have a look how they perform before we look at some other ones. As you can see, there are major advantages and disadvantages in Gauge 1. You don't have to model the weather. You've got to take it as it comes. If the track's reasonable, snow clearing is no major obstacle and adds to the reality. The smell of steam and oil is something that the smaller scales just don't provide. Like the real engine driver, you have hot hands and cold feet. And here, I must admit personal involvement. The Type 4 diesel-electric locomotive for which I'm infamous. Now radio-controlled, of course. The bogies have 6 axle-hung motors, just like the real thing. The diesel drives a DC generator and an AC exciter. This was the first ever fully working miniature diesel-electric locomotive model. Railways provide an enormous challenge to those of us of engineering bent. The Gauge 1 Society published a book on what's called the Project, a simple, straightforward, single-cylinder locomotive which could appear in many guises. It's a sort of advanced primer for locomotive builders. A docile engine which a beginner with a small workshop can produce without raiding the housekeeping money too deeply and risking a divorce. And just a word about the line itself. Rather than the customary circle, I've decided to build a dog bone, so what you can see is a double-track main line with a station which blends into the countryside. From my snowbound railway to the place where it's always summer, Pendon Museum at Long Wittenham in Oxfordshire, showing the heyday of the Great Western Railway. Looking at your engine and looking at the way they run, and they run very, very sweetly. What's the secret? Because they don't have this sort of kangaroo jump. Have you got rid of the gearing that you normally have on model locomotives?
Yes, no worm gearing for us. It's spur gears in all of our locomotives. The sweetness of the running is the result of years of experiment here at Pendon. Nowadays, we use modern DC motors, which require very little current, and these are married with specially designed electronic controllers designed by Stuart Hine, which allows us to reproduce very closely the acceleration and the braking which one sees in a normal train.
You don't have any flywheels in them, do you?
We don't need any flywheels at all, no.
But you know, you have to learn how to drive them because they don't stop immediately, do they?
That's right, yes. No, the flywheel effect is electronic rather than mechanical here at Pendon.
But the secret of Pendon's successful operation are the hidden sidings where all the trains are stored. Fred Austin, what you have here is a mimic diagram of your sidings. Can you set a route on that?
Yes, certainly.
Now you have set a route. But can you see the train actually progressing down the line?
Yes, as the train leaves the sidings, the lights change from green to red, so we can follow its progress out of the siding and down the points and crossings.
Well, how do you collect current? Is it a split frame job?
No, our loco builders don't believe in split frames. They stick with lightly sprung contacts on as many wheels as they can, picking up from the rear of the flanges.
How much engine maintenance do you have to do?
Surprisingly little. Locomotives here typically run for several months before they need going into shops for a minor maintenance of cleaning contacts, a little bit of cleaning of treads, and probably very, very judicious oiling of the moving parts.
So what is the real other secret of keeping your trains running so well?
Well, the other secret is to keep the track as clean as possible. Now that we've got these engines with the motors which take very little current, track cleaning isn't nearly such a problem as it was in the old days, but we do have to clean the track. We've got a lot of track which is inaccessible, so again we've designed a special vehicle which uses a principle which we first met in the American magazine Model Railroader. And what this vehicle does, basically, is to push a sheet of hardboard over the track surface. We're so pleased with this track cleaning method that we call it our Heineken. It really does clean the parts which other track cleaners do not.
The realism of a good strain of over 80 vehicles is greatly surpassed by the incredible detail of their models. The picture you're looking at now is at least 6 times larger than the model itself. Brass kits help the beginner to achieve good detail, but don't be fooled. They don't just jump out of the box waiting to be glued together. By sheer coincidence, this brass kit fits onto my railway. Stuart Hine, who also designs brass kits, has some very important points about their assembly.
Now the first thing we find in this is a nice pre-formed aluminium roof. Now that's a great help in making a model because roofs are nasty things to bend. We've also got a pre-formed brass body. As you can see, it's got all the plank detail etched on it and some slots to locate all the pieces that you stick on. These are all the small parts. See here we've got parts already cut out for you and etched with detail and bend lines.
Do you all break them out now?
Oh no, only when you're ready to stick them on. There are one or two cases where you may need to go through one piece, which you don't want yet, in order to get to the piece you do want. And what you do then, you have a little screw top jar handy, and the pieces that you cut out that you're not quite ready to use, you put them in there. That way they won't get away. I'm afraid most kit instruction sheets do leave a lot to be desired. It's a good idea to have a photograph of the vehicle you're actually going to build handy, as well as the manufacturer's instruction sheet. Now, the first thing I've got to do is to open the sides out a bit so that I can get in here and punch these rivet impressions from the back. I'm using an automatic centre punch because it gives the same impact each time, so all your rivets, with any luck, will come out the same size.
So having done your riveting, what happens next?
Well, I've got to take this end piece and fix some angle strapping to it, and I've also got to bend these side flanges down before I solder it to the main body. I'm going to bend it in the vise, but first of all I'm going to put a little bit of tape along the riveted detail to protect it so that the vise doesn't squash it flat. I'm setting it in the vise so that the bend line is just clear of the tops of the jaws. Then bend it all over in one go, like that.
Right, Stuart, now you've bent it, what happens next?
Well, I've got to take these strapping pieces out of the fret and solder them onto this.
What on earth is that?
It's a pair of tin snips.
That's a bit big for the job.
No, not really. Large snips do a nice clean cut. Much better than little ones.
And of course, you've got to finish this with a fine file. Now to the soldering. What are you putting on there?
Solder paint. It's powdered solder mixed up with a liquid flux. So all you have to do is brush it or spread it onto a joint and then heat it.
That's rather a big iron.
Well, particularly with a big kit like this, one thing you have got to have is an iron that gets hot enough. And most of the modern small irons that are designed for electronic work don't get hot enough for kit assembly.
So you've only done one little bit on each side?
I'm just going to tack it at each end. if you don't keep the joint under pressure while it's sealing, you'll get it cockling as one part heats up more than the other. The best way to do it is to turn it over, just tin the heavy part of the iron bit, and then just press it down and heat it all the way down the back in one movement.
And now to give it stability, the angle. Electric power by the courtesy of my generator thumping away in the background. Structural strength is achieved when the end is fitted onto the sides.
I'm just lining it up so that the overhang is equal on both sides. Lining up the buffer holes is not so important because you can always file those to fit afterwards.
And you put solder paste on the buffer beam.
Yes. And as before, I'm just going to put a little tack at each corner before I sweat the whole thing.
And you're putting a reasonably strong fillet of solder in there.
Yes, so this is one of the main structural joints.
Don't use glue on brass kits. It doesn't stand up to the wear and tear. And make sure you clean off the excess solder with a sharp scrape and give the whole thing a good scrub with a stiff brush and detergent.
One bit that everybody seems to find difficult in kits like this is bending the channel irons for the sole bars. It's easy enough, but you must provide yourself with some pieces of bright mild steel flat like these. What I'm going to do is trap the sole bar in between the two of them, put it in the vise and clamp it up, and we have a third piece to push it with. That's most important.
And now the second leg.
And there's a perfectly nice channel sole bar. What's difficult about that? I have made a couple of changes from the instructions in making this up. One, are these pieces of channel along the cant rails to make it nice and stiff. Secondly, I've put these fairly thick pieces of angle at the ends because I want to have a little tapped hole in each so that I can screw the roof on. I always like to be able to get inside the vehicles just in case anything ever goes wrong.
Once painted, even an undercoat makes the model look real. A completely different form of realism is achieved by the rose, and it's all in 4mm to the foot.
When I saw the Leighton Barford quarry, I knew straight away I had to model it with the whole of its washing plant in its entirety. My original idea was just to have a little bit of sand operating plant at the side of the canal. I've ended up with an additional cabinet, which was never intended in the first place because that rusty metal drew me like a magnet. Derelict ironmongery has a fascination for me. My wife won't agree on that point. She says it's rusting scrap iron. But a modern, new structure has little of interest in it. But when the rust is starting to peel the paint off of the undercoat, off of the primer, back down to the bare, rusty metal, something clicks in my brain and says, ah, I must model that. I find I need something more than the ordinary model railway to satisfy my creative needs. I want these working objects, as well as the ordinary track, locomotives, points that people have operating. I want further challenges, and the additional advantage is that in an exhibition, visitors are entertained. So often at an exhibition, one sees father and son who have dragged along with them wife and daughter. And with the ordinary model railway, they have little entertainment, I'm afraid. When they see one of mine with a fisherman apparently fishing, or the skipper skipping. That is what the wife and the daughter remember when they get home.
Why do you use real water? What's the reason?
Nothing else looks like water in my experience. One can use varnish and it looks like varnish. And of course I had the additional problem of wanting a swan that would swim, narrow boats that would rise and fall, and a fisherman who would cast his line into real water.
You cope with it because water and models are really two things that shouldn't mix.
Yes, I've had to make the boats out of nickel silver and seal them to make them completely watertight, and I've had to take great care that water didn't creep up vertical surfaces onto the fields. When I first saw the dragline excavator, it was lying derelict in the corner of a sandpit, and I thought, that would be nice to have as a little object standing in the side of the sandpit. And I had completed the excavator in a non-working condition the first time I took it to an exhibition in London. And because of the delicate work on the jib, which involved some 120 separate pieces of brass being soldered together, I thought that nobody would expect such a delicate little object to work. The exhibition opened. Within 5 minutes, the first visitor came round. "Doesn't the dragline excavator work then?" And it went on all week.
How do you go about collecting, as it were, your raw material information?
The first thing with a building is to find the building. This is just wandering around various towns or cities and you see a building which attracts you, so you tend to think that would make a nice model. I perhaps tend to think more the pretty buildings, whereas Dave thinks more along the lines of the grotty buildings.
Old ironmongery.
Yes, junk. When we find a building that appeals to both of us, we measure it and we take numerous photographs, as many as possible. We never seem to have too many. We ask the people who occupy the building if we can look at the inside, because quite often you get more idea of the structure of the building from looking at it from inside the roof and such like. People are usually very cooperative. And in fact, they've always been very cooperative. They think we're a bit mad, but it doesn't matter.
And so here are the Leighton Buzzard sand workings in all their charming decrepitude, preserved by David and Shirley Rowe. To make a model look real, the lining has to be right. Steve makes his own water slides. He starts by drawing the black line with a draftsman's rotring pen. Then the bow pen, which I can never get to work properly. How much is a good one?
Some cost up to about £25, and if you're really keen on getting a nice fine line, you really must pay that sort of money, unfortunately.
Therefore, a new tin of paint for each job is no waste.
That particular tin has been well stirred and well shaken, and the consistency really is a little bit thicker than pouring cream.
You use flat or gloss?
It's a matte paint.
How do you load your pen?
Well, I do it with a small screwdriver or any pointed item like a cocktail stick.
A brush would do too?
A brush would do too, but I find that a screwdriver blade is nice and easy to keep white clean. Now I'm just going to test the thickness of the line, actually on the ruler here, until we get.
Ruler.
Yes, it's gives a similar sort of surface to the painted surface on the model. And as soon as you're satisfied with the thickness of the line, transfer it onto the paper. Not too much paint, and don't try and get too many lines out of one load into the pen. Now I'm going to clean that and reload for the next line.
Ah, the trick is wash out every time.
Every time, yes.
The Britannia lining, of course, is orange. Now you're threading it under all the clobber handrails and everything else.
That's right, yes. It's possible to do it once the transfer paper has been dampened, but the transfer itself then becomes very floppy, and of course it's not quite so easy to handle. But the general idea is to have one complete band there, if possible, and then cut it off just a little bit longer than is necessary, and then wet it well. So what I'm going to do now is just gently push off the actual transfer.
So you make your own transfer and you
Yes.
slide on. You can, of course, use the same technique to make other things.
That's right, yes. Awkward shapes for splashes behind pipework and things like that are extremely easy to draw out on a flat piece of paper using various templates or draftsman's curves. And then just pull that out.
Do you go with that casing?
No, that's a cover for some pipes. All I shall do now is just cut that off. And just lay it gently into place.
Here she is, fully lined out and ready for service. David and Beverly Lowry are watching their little ones' first steps.
I'm very lucky in having a wife that will lend a hand in operating. Although she doesn't model as such, she's very good at operating. And I remember a story a while back. One of my colleagues was operating the layout at an exhibition, and he got a little engrossed with some people on the other side of the layout, and the operating went a little bit haywire. And seeing this, Bev got up and threw him off and carried on operating, showing that the operating of the layout came first before everything else. And I think from that day, I've been very impressed and quite taken back by it.
A lot of people think it's a strange thing for a woman to be interested in, because there are not very many women that are interested, which is a shame. I find with Dave's layouts, a lot of women that come along to shows do appreciate the scenery. I also think it's nice because if you're doing fairly separate things during the week, or you're both busy people, you can get together at weekends and share a hobby, which I think is important.
The planning stage of any of my layouts, for me, takes a considerable amount of time and effort goes into this. I will start off with a basic plan, which I think holds a few good ideas, and I will literally destroy it over a period of time. The planning stage for me can take several months on any particular project. My first project started as a very small test track, and this over the years has grown into quite a sizable layout. And it's in the region of 12 foot by 6 foot now. And this is getting a little bit out of hand. For my own particular modelling satisfaction, I prefer something a little smaller. For my own part, I prefer doing the much finer detailing. And to achieve detailing over a large area, you're looking at quite a sizable project. And if the end's too far away, people, I think, get put off. So it's better to start small, and even if it is a big plan, you can start small, build it up slowly, stage by stage, and at each stage a finished layout will be able to give you the satisfaction of operating.
And to prove what he says, Dave produced his beginner's layout, entirely built from commercial items. So take heart if you're a beginner.